Supply-demand is a mode of understanding the determination of the price or quantity of a good sold on the market. Then what is demand? Demand is the quantity of a good that potential purchaser would buy or attempt to buy at a certain price. Demand curve graphically shows the relationship between the price of good and the quantity demanded, holding the constant all other variables that influence the demand. The law of demand shows a negative relationship between price and quantity demanded. It shows demand usually falls as the price of a good rises, and so the slope of the line is negative. Mathematically, P is then said to be a decreasing function of Q. Now, let's look at the definition of supply. Supply is a quantity of output brought for sale in the market at a certain price. It is drawn as a slope rising upward from left to right since product price and quantity supply are directly related. Market equilibrium is a point of intersection where the quantity supply exactly matches the quantity demanded. For example, if QO PO matches satisfies demand and supply equation, QD is equal to QS. The concept of supply and demand is discovered and developed through early scholars. John Locke and James Stewart are two main scholars that have established the concept. John Locke didn't actually mention the phrase supply and demand. However, he describes the concept in his publication 1691, and it shows the early and clear description of supply and demand and their relationship. Supply and demand was first mentioned by James Stewart in his inquiries. He has realized the relation of supply and demand on labor. When supply is higher than demand, price reduces, leading to unprofitability. And if merchants aren't making profit, they are not able to pay workers, leading to high unemployment.
Moving on to the demand and supply model of pricing. As mentioned previously, microequilibrium is where the supply and demand curve intersect. Hence, it is evident that the equilibrium price is when quantity supplied is equal to quantity demanded. In order to solve the equilibrium price and quantity, we can take the algebraic approach where simultaneous equations are used. For example, this can be applied to the market for pens in pure competition. If we know that the supply equation is equal to minus 5 plus 3p, and the demand equation is 3 minus 1p, then since quantity demanded equals quantity supplied, we make both equations equal to each other, which becomes 3 minus p equals to minus 5 plus 3p plus p. We then solve this algebraically, hence it becomes 4p equals 8 and then p equals 2. Therefore, at equilibrium, the price is $2 per pen. In order to find the equilibrium quantity, we would just need to substitute the equilibrium price back into the equation. In this case, 3 minus 1 times by 2, which equals 1. Hence, the equilibrium quantity is 1. Now that we know what the market equilibrium quantity and price is, we may demonstrate this illustratively on the model. The demand and supply model is also useful in determining consumer surplus and producer surplus. Consumer surplus is the area under the demand curve and above the equilibrium price. It measures consumer satisfaction, which is calculated by identifying how much consumers are willing to pay relative to the market price. In the end, consumers' marginal utility will diminish as they will reconsider whether the good is worth it. In comparison to consumer surplus, producer surplus is the difference between the price producers are able and willing to supply for and what they actually receive from their customers. Here is an example of calculating consumer and producer surplus. It is evident that we can also calculate consumer and producer surplus in an XY graph. As seen before, an XY graph is needed to calculate price, quantity, and consumer and producer surplus. Using the example from earlier on, where price equals 2 and quantity equals 1, we will calculate the consumer and producer surplus. Because consumer surplus is in the shape of a triangle, we can use the formula that calculates the area of the triangle, in this case the formula being half times base times height. Therefore, the equation becomes half times 1 times 2, which equals 1. Therefore, the consumer surplus becomes $1. To calculate producer surplus, we use the same formula. Area equals half times breadth times height. In this case, it also becomes half times 1 times 2, which also equals 1. Therefore, it is evident that the producer surplus is also 1. Moving on to the assumptions. Assumptions involved in the demand and supply model of pricing includes that there are no other factors affecting the price. For instance, this would be no change in price of other goods. It is also operating in a competitive market. Price takers cannot influence the price, and that the supply and demand functions are of linear type. Supply has positive slopes, whereas demand has a negative slope, except when in perfect competition.
Guys, so now I'm going to tell you about the shift of supply line. Here we got demand and supply diagram already. So when supply increase, the supply line will shift to the right, and when supply decrease, the supply line will shift to the left. So now I will show you when supply is decreasing. Here we got the original supply line, which is S1, and I will draw new supply line on the left side of the original line, and we call it S2. So now we see that supply line is shifting to the left and appear as new line, which is line S2. At first the price is at P1, and when supply decrease, the price will increase to P2. Now we are going to find the equation of line S2, assuming line S1 is y equal 1x plus 1 and line B is y equal minus 1x plus 8. Because S2 is parallel with S1, so gradient of line S1 is equal to gradient of line S2. To find the number of equation, which is the number that stands alone, we are looking at the number where the line intercept y-axis, which is the price line. Here we got line S1 cut y-axis at price of 1. So this one is equal to this one. And we got line S2 as y equal 1x plus 4, because this one is equal to this one. Now you can find the original price and the price after decrease in supply by finding the equilibrium point that we have told you before. I'm going to use avocado as an example of the supply and demand diagram. So at the beginning, the price of avocado is at P1, which is $4 each, and supply is decreasing because it's not at its harvesting season. Because of that, the price of avocado is increasing by $1.5 from $4.5 each to $6 each.
Overall, the supply and demand model is an economic model that is used in everyday life to demonstrate all sorts of things. However, it may be seen as basic as they do not take into account other external factors. Thank you for watching.